She raised her glass and laughed. "Look at her dress. Did she borrow it from a thrift store?" And the whole table joined in. Their laughter sliced through me sharper than any knife. I sat there, frozen in my chair at the far end of the table, my hands clenched in my lap. The glittering chandeliers above us scattered light over their sequined dresses and tailored suits, making them sparkle like royalty. And me? I sat in a plain blue dress I had worn before, the only one that still fit me after the last few difficult years. "Don't look at her shoes," another voice snickered. My nephew leaned into his girlfriend, whispering loudly enough for the whole table to hear. "Those are at least 10 years old. She's probably waiting for them to come back in style." The girl laughed, her bangles jingling. My ears burned. I kept my eyes on the cake in the center of the table, 3 tiers tall, glowing with candles. If I stared at it long enough, maybe I could pretend none of this was happening. But it was happening. Every word was about me. Even my daughter-in-law, dressed in gold silk, leaned toward another woman and muttered, "I begged her not to wear that." She never listens. Always embarrassing us. I caught the words, every syllable. My throat tightened. Embarrassing them? As if I existed only to make their evenings uncomfortable. As if I had no worth beyond being their shadow. I forced a smile, but my jaw hurt from holding it in place. Inside, I felt like I was unraveling. I reached for my glass of water, hoping the coolness would steady me. My hand shook. Then my cousin across the table raised her voice as though she wanted the entire hall to hear. At least she showed up, though I can't imagine how she can stand to sit here, with nothing to her name. The laughter erupted again, louder this time, bouncing off the marble walls. I swallowed hard. My chair felt like it was pushing me further and further into the ground, burying me alive in shame. But then, something shifted. As the clinking of glasses and the chorus of giggles continued, I overheard a sentence not meant for me. My brother's wife leaned into her sister and whispered, "We only invited her because it makes us look generous. People think we care for her, the poor thing." The poor thing. Those words cut deeper than all the laughter. That was the truth, wasn't it? I wasn't family here. I was a prop, a display to polish their own image. I breathed in slowly, pressing the pain down, deep inside. And with that breath, something else rose in its place. Not tears, not despair, but fire. I sat up straighter, though my body still trembled. When the waiter placed a plate of cake in front of me, my cousin snorted, "Careful, don't give her too much. She doesn't need it." That was it. I looked directly at her, my voice steady, low, but sharp enough to silence her laugh. "You'll regret laughing at me tonight." Her painted lips parted, shocked that I had spoken back. She scoffed, waving her hand as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. The others chuckled again, dismissing me. But my words hung in the air like a storm cloud no one wanted to acknowledge. I picked up my fork, tasted the frosting, and let the sweetness dissolve on my tongue. I forced myself to stay, to smile, to nod politely when someone made a toast. All the while, my heart beat steady, not with humiliation anymore, but with a plan I hadn't even realized I was forming. They thought I had nothing. They thought I was powerless. They thought I had no place in this golden room, among their laughter and pride. When the band began to play and everyone rose to dance, I stayed seated, watching them swirl across the polished floor. They looked untouchable in that moment, shining and free, but I knew better. I leaned back, folding my hands calmly in my lap. Inside, my voice whispered to me, "Not much longer. Just endure this night. Tomorrow will belong to you." As the party wound down and people gathered coats and purses, my cousin passed by again, smirking. She bent slightly toward another relative and said in a mocking stage whisper, "She has nothing. Just wait until she tries to speak." I didn't flinch this time. I looked straight ahead, the corner of my mouth tightening into the faintest smile. They didn't know. They had no idea. In my mind, one thought echoed stronger than the music, louder than their laughter. They don't know what's coming. I slipped out before the last toast, leaving my chair empty at the table of mockery. No one noticed I was gone. Or maybe they did, but none of them cared enough to stop me. The night air hit me like a slap when I stepped outside the banquet hall. It was cool, heavy with the smell of roses planted along the path. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked toward the row of cars waiting under soft yellow lights. Their luxury vehicles gleamed. Black sedans, polished SUVs, even a sports car with tinted windows. They looked like thrones on wheels, lined up as if to remind me how little I belonged. And then there was mine, an old sedan with fading paint, tucked at the far end of the lot. For a moment, I just stood there, clutching my purse, staring at the contrast. I could hear their laughter spilling from the hall behind me, muffled but sharp, following me into the night. I felt my pride crumble all over again. I pressed a hand against my chest, willing myself not to cry. Not here, not now. Tears would only give them more power. My phone buzzed inside my bag. I pulled it out, expecting another cruel message from my daughter-in-law. But no, it was a notification I had almost forgotten about. A reminder, the bank, the documents, my accounts. I froze, staring at the glowing screen. In that instant, the fire inside me sparked again. They thought I had nothing. They thought I was invisible. But every deed, every signature, every account was still mine. I slipped into my car and gripped the steering wheel. My hands shook, not from shame anymore, but from something sharper, determination. The engine coughed to life, far less impressive than the hum of the cars lined up beside me, but it carried me away from their world of champagne and false smiles. The further I drove, the quieter their voices became, until finally, there was only silence. Halfway home, I replayed their words in my head, every insult echoing like a wound pressed too hard. And then, cutting through that noise, my voicemail alert chimed. I pressed play, holding the phone to my ear. A man's voice whispered, calm and professional. Everything is still under your name only. Nothing has changed. Call me when you're ready. I nearly had to pull over. My chest tightened, but this time not with shame. With power, my name, my control, my choice. By the time I reached home, my tears had dried. The humiliation of the evening had burned itself into something new. I walked inside my modest house, the one place they never bothered to step foot in. To them, it wasn't glamorous enough. To me, it was a fortress. I set my purse down and went straight to the study. The lamp on my desk cast a warm glow, and dust floated in the air like tiny witnesses. I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up the files I had saved. One by one, the numbers appeared. Accounts, properties, businesses. Every single line reminded me that I wasn't empty. I wasn't powerless. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Should I move the funds? Should I transfer ownerships? I didn't answer yet. I just stared at the evidence of everything they had taken for granted, and everything they had forgotten I controlled. I rose and walked to the corner of the room, to the small safe built into the wall behind a painting. My hands moved without hesitation now. I pressed the code, heard the click, and swung the door open. Inside sat the thick folder I hadn't touched in months. Its spine was worn, the corners bent, but across the cover, my handwriting stood out in black marker, property and accounts. I pulled it out slowly, my heart pounding louder than the ticking clock on the wall. And as I laid it flat on my desk, a thought curled in my mind. Cold and steady, tomorrow the game begins. They strutted like royalty, but their castles stood on land I owned. That truth had been buried under years of humiliation, years where I let their words weigh heavier than the facts. Tonight, as I spread the folder across my desk, the memories came back sharper than ever. I remembered the day my late husband and I bought our first property. We were young, terrified, and proud. We worked every shift we could, saved every dollar, and signed those papers with trembling hands. And then, one by one, more properties followed. I learned the language of deeds, contracts, and mortgage slips. I built the foundation they now pretended was theirs. Yet somehow, they had managed to twist the story. Don't forget who you live with, my brother once snapped years ago, when I dared question him. You'd be out on the street if it weren't for us. I had believed him. Because while the signatures on those papers carried my name, he held the keys to the houses, drove the cars, and strutted at the parties. He made me feel like a guest, not the owner. But tonight, staring at the documents, I saw the truth. There it was. My name etched in black ink across the deed for the lake house they bragged about every summer. My name printed on the contract for the business they ran as if it were their creation. My name stamped on mortgage slips for homes they furnished, flaunted, and pretended were theirs. I whispered to myself, tracing the letters with my finger. It was always mine. Their fake kingdom had survived only because I stayed silent. But silence had an expiration date, and tonight it had ended. The clock read close to midnight, but I didn't care. I picked up my phone, scrolled to the one contact I hadn't called in over a year, and pressed the number. The line clicked. Then a familiar, tired voice answered. "This is Harold." "Who's calling at this hour?" I steadied my breath. "It's me. I need to move forward." There was a pause. Then his tone sharpened. "You're serious?" "Yes." My voice didn't waver this time. "I want everything transferred. Every account frozen. Every property locked down. It ends tonight." I could almost hear him straighten in his chair. "Are you ready to pull the trigger?" I stared down at the contracts fanned out across my desk. The ink, the stamps, the seals, they were mine. They had always been mine. I thought of the laughter at that banquet hall, of my cousin's smirk, of my daughter-in-law's whispered cruelty, and suddenly I felt nothing but clarity. After tonight, I said, my voice like steel, I have no reason to wait. I heard Harold exhale, slow and deliberate. Then let's begin. I'll draft the first notices now. You'll need to sign before morning. My heart pounded. I reached for a pen and slid the first document toward me. The paper was cold under my hand, heavy with meaning. As I hovered over the line, my mind flicked through the years. The times they told me I should be grateful they included me. The times they used my credit for loans, promising they'd take care of it, only for me to discover the bills piling up in my name. The times they bragged about vacations paid for with my money, while I was left behind with nothing but scraps. They thought I had forgotten. They thought I was too weak to ever rise. But here I was, pen in hand. The tip touched the paper. My signature flowed, steady and firm, across the first line. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, the shame that had clung to me loosened its grip. One document done. Dozens more to go. I signed again, and again. Each stroke of the pen was a blade slicing through years of humiliation. Each paper I marked was another wall of their kingdom collapsing. I could almost hear their voices in my head, panicked and confused. What do you mean the account is frozen? Why can't we access the funds? Their arrogance would crumble the moment reality hit. By the time the last paper slid into the folder, my hand ached, but I felt lighter than I had in years. I placed the pen down slowly, almost ceremoniously, as though I were laying down a weapon after battle. The folder sat there, thick and complete, no longer just a stack of papers. It was the key to dismantling everything they had stolen from me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at it. A strange calm filled me. The clock ticked toward morning. Soon, they would wake to a world that no longer belonged to them. I whispered into the quiet room, a promise to myself. By sunrise, they will know who truly held the power all along. And with that, I slid the signed documents back into the folder. The lock clicked shut, echoing in the silence like a gavel. Tomorrow, their empire would fall. By sunrise, the phone started ringing. The shrill vibration rattled across the kitchen counter, but I didn't rush to answer. Instead, I moved slowly, deliberately, setting a porcelain cup on the table. Steam curled from the kettle, whispering as if conspiring with me. I spooned tea leaves into the pot, the ritual calm against the chaos I knew was brewing outside my walls. The first call came from my daughter-in-law. I saw her name flash on the screen, her entitled tone echoing in my memory. Decline. The second, my sister, always the one to sound falsely sweet, even in rage. Decline. By the fifth call, I set the phone face down and smiled faintly. They were waking to the world I had carefully constructed overnight. For the first time, I was ahead. I stirred honey into my tea, the clink of the spoon like a metronome keeping time with the chaos unraveling elsewhere. Across town, they would be reaching for credit cards that no longer worked. At gas stations, their luxury SUVs would be declined. At boutiques, the clerks would frown, apologetic but firm. The kingdom they had paraded was dissolving with each swipe. By the sixth call, the voicemail finally played. My eldest son's voice cracked with fury. "Mom, what the hell did you do? My card, our accounts, everything's frozen. This is insane. Call me back right now." I sipped slowly. Insane, he called it. No, this was order restored. The next message came from my brother. His bluster barely concealed his fear. "You can't do this. You need us. Stop this before it goes too far. Need them?" The memory of last night's smirks, of glasses raised in mockery at my expense, replayed in my mind. They had always believed I was dependent, when in truth, the ground beneath their feet had always been mine. Another call. This time I answered. "What did you do?" My daughter shrieked before I could speak. "I just tried to pay for breakfast and the card was declined. In front of everyone. Are you trying to humiliate us?" I let the silence stretch, sipping my tea, letting her drown in her own panic. Finally I spoke, my voice calm, steady, unshaken. I took back what was mine. Her gasp was sharp, as though the truth itself was an insult. "You can't just, Mom, think about us." The mortgages, the cars, the businesses, all of them, I interrupted, were in my name. "You only borrowed the shine. Now the lights are off." She began to cry, or perhaps rage disguised as tears. I ended the call before it mattered. The house was quiet again, save for the low hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of the clock. The world beyond was noisy with their collapse, but within these walls, I felt peace. maybe for the first time in years. By mid-morning, the messages had shifted from rage to begging. Promises, bargains, desperate assurances that they loved me, that we were family, that this was all a misunderstanding. Their words dripped with the same false honey they'd used at every holiday, every birthday, every gathering where they dismissed me as a shadow. I scrolled through the texts but replied to none. The banker called at last. His tone was businesslike, professional, but I could hear the quiet satisfaction beneath it. "Everything has been secured," he said. "All accounts have been transferred under your sole control. Titles, deeds, holdings, they cannot touch a cent." I closed my eyes, exhaling a breath I didn't know I had been holding. The words settled in me like a key turning in a lock. For years, I had been their silent benefactor, their invisible foundation. Now, with one night's work, I had turned into their undoing. The kettle clicked as it cooled. My tea had grown lukewarm, but I drank it anyway. It tasted better than any feast I had ever been allowed to attend. Clutching the warm cup, I looked toward the safe in the other room, where folders still waited. This was only the beginning. The cliff was behind me. The fall was theirs to take. And tomorrow, I thought, as the phone rang again and again, I would decide who, if anyone, deserved mercy. By noon, they were outside my gate, shouting my name like beggars. I heard them before I saw them, the clamor of angry voices layered with cries of desperation. My family, once so regal in their posturing, now clustered outside my iron gate like petitioners at a palace they no longer controlled. From my window, I watched them pace and wave their arms. The glossy shine of their cars was already dulled by the tow trucks that had claimed them that morning. Designer coats and polished shoes looked oddly out of place on a driveway they suddenly had no right to enter. I stood in the quiet cool of my living room. The contrast could not have been sharper. Inside, calm order, my documents neatly stacked on the table, my accounts secure. Outside, chaos. They shouted my name, some with anger, some with pleading. "Mom, please open up." "Sister, don't do this, we're family." Family. The word rolled bitterly in my mouth. For hours they had bombarded me with calls, messages, threats veiled as pleas. Now, they had come in person, their arrogance burned away by hunger and fear. I could have ignored them, let them wear themselves out. But something inside me stirred, a need not for revenge but for truth. For once I wanted to see their faces as they admitted what they had done. I opened the door and stepped outside, my heels clicking against the stone path. The air was brisk, the kind that sharpens every sound, every word. Their heads turned at once, eyes widening, as though I were some queen descending to pass judgment. Finally, my daughter-in-law cried, rushing forward. Her mascara had run in black rivers down her cheeks. "We need you, please." "We don't have access to anything. Our cards, the houses, the businesses." I raised a hand and she froze. My voice was quiet but firm. "Where was that respect last night?" Her lips trembled, her answer caught in her throat. My son pushed past her, his tone harsher. "This isn't fair, Mom. You can't just strip us of everything. We built this life together." I looked him square in the eye. "Together? Show me a single deed in your name, a single account that wasn't mine. You strutted on my shoulders and called it your own. Last night you mocked me while drinking from cups I bought." His mouth opened, then closed. Behind him, my sister tried her hand at a softer tone. We only said those things to keep you humble, to remind you where you came from." The admission sliced through me. There it was. The truth I had always suspected but never heard aloud. They mocked me to keep me in my place. I felt a flicker of the old hurt, the sting of years spent diminished in their eyes. But it didn't last long. In its place came something stronger, righteous power. I stepped closer to the gate, studying each desperate face. Humble? No. You kept me silent because you feared what would happen if I spoke. Well, I'm speaking now, and you will listen. Their voices overlapped, a mess of apologies, excuses, and bargains. My brother promised to make things right. My daughter pleaded that the grandchildren would suffer. My son swore they never meant the insults, but I saw through it. Not remorse, fear. Not respect, survival. "I am not your safety net anymore," I said evenly. "You mocked me. You dismissed me. You treated me like a burden when all along you lived off me like leeches. That time is finished." My daughter-in-law sobbed openly now, clutching the gate as though she might pry it open with her bare hands. "Please, it will change. We'll do anything. Just let us back in." Her desperation might once have moved me. Today, it only solidified my resolve. I drew myself up, my voice ringing out across the driveway, cutting through their pleas like steel. "You have 1 hour to leave my property or I call the police." Their gasps hung in the air, heavy and stunned. I turned my back to them, the sound of their frantic voices chasing me as I walked back into my home. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing them out. For the first time, I felt no guilt. Only the weight of authority finally settled on my shoulders where it had always belonged. The clock ticked in the hallway. 1 hour. Then the reckoning would be complete. They tried one final card. Blame. By late afternoon, the storm outside my gate had dulled into a tense silence. When I finally cracked the door, their faces were worn. No longer shouting, but pleading. Against my better judgment, I allowed them inside. Not out of mercy, but for closure. We sat in the living room, the air thick with unease. I chose the armchair by the window, a deliberate reminder of whose house this was. They crowded together on the sofa, stripped of their former arrogance. Yet their eyes still glimmered with calculation. My brother was the first to speak, his voice dripping with accusation. "This is cruel. You're destroying us. After all we've done as a family, is this how you repay us?" I tilted my head, steady, unmoved. "Family? Tell me, was it family when you called me a burden? When you laughed at me while raising your glasses?" He bristled but pressed on. "You're selfish. You always held the money over us. Now you're proving it. We'll be ruined!" His words, meant to wound, only clarified what I had known all along. They hadn't come for reconciliation. They had come for survival. To them, I was never mother, sister, or aunt. I was the vault they believed they could rattle open forever. I let their voices tangle into a chorus of blame. "You don't care about us! You'll regret this!" What about the children? Each accusation fell flat against the walls of my home. At last, I reached for the folder on the coffee table. The thick stack of contracts, deeds, and notes landed with a heavy thud. Their eyes followed it as though it were a weapon. "This," I said, flipping the pages, "is every loan you begged for. Every mortgage I signed in my name. Every business deal you propped on my credit. Each one bears your signature." I slid the contracts across the table. They stared but didn't touch them. Guilt flickered briefly across my son's face before pride snuffed it out. My brother's voice cracked with desperation. "We'll be ruined!" I met his eyes, my voice sharp, unyielding. "Then you'll feel how I did last night." Silence spread through the room. For once, none of them had a reply. They were naked now, stripped of excuses. Their fortress of lies dissolved into paper and ink. My daughter-in-law whispered, her voice trembling. "We never meant to hurt you. We thought you'd always be there." There it was, the confession they hadn't intended to give. They hadn't just used me. They had planned to keep using me until there was nothing left. I leaned back, my heartbeat steady. The hurt that once stung so deeply was gone. In its place stood a wall of clarity. They were not my family in spirit. They were dependents, parasites cloaked in familiar faces. I gathered the papers back into the folder and snapped it shut. The sound echoed in the quiet room like the final note of a verdict. My voice was calm, absolute. "You've lost everything. I still have myself." Their faces fell. Shame for some, rage for others. But none of it mattered anymore. The folder rested in my lap, the proof of everything I had endured and reclaimed. I stood, and the discussion ended with me. For the first time in years, I sipped my tea without fear. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, warm and gentle. Not mocking, not threatening, just light. I sat at my kitchen table, the steam rising from my cup, and felt a peace I had almost forgotten existed. The phone was silent now. No threats, no tears, no desperate pounding at the gate. The storm had passed, and in its place stillness. I let the quiet seep into me. For so long, every sip of tea had been clouded by the weight of their whispers, their sneers, their sense of superiority. I had swallowed bitterness along with every swallow, convincing myself that silence was the safer path. Not today. Today, the cup tasted of freedom. But peace is never without its shadows. As I gazed into the amber surface of my tea, guilt flickered at the edges of my mind. Had I gone too far? Had I become as cruel as they once were? The questions lingered, heavy, until I closed my eyes and remembered. I remembered my daughter-in-law smirking as she called me old-fashioned. I remembered my brother laughing at my clothes. My voice drowned out at every dinner. I remembered the toast last night, their glasses lifted high, not to celebrate me, but to mock me. Every humiliation I had endured replayed itself, and with each memory, the guilt ebbed. I had not been cruel. I had been just. They had taken my generosity and twisted it into their throne, their crowns polished with my sacrifices. They had treated me not as family, but as a bank they could bleed dry. And when I refused to be silent any longer, they called me selfish. No, I thought, opening my eyes. Justice had been fair. I rose and walked to the safe, pulling out the thick folder once more. This time, I didn't look at the contracts with anger, but with clarity. These papers were proof not only of their debts, but of my endurance. They had bound me to them with lies, and I had cut myself free with truth, but freedom was not enough. I wanted dignity, not only for myself, but for others who had known the sting of mockery, the weight of dismissal. That afternoon, I called my banker and instructed him to begin transferring a portion of my wealth into charitable foundations, scholarships, housing programs, shelters. My money would no longer be wasted on luxury cars or empty status. It would build futures, roofs, and dignity for those who truly needed it. When the paperwork was done, I sat back and whispered aloud, my voice steady and sure. Respect can't be bought. It's earned. The house echoed with the truth of it. For so long, I had tried to earn respect through silence, through sacrifice, through being what they demanded. But respect was not in their power to give. It had always been mine to claim. The evening settled in quietly. I cooked a simple meal, set one place at the table, and ate without rush. No false laughter, no eyes rolling at my words, no weight pressing me down. Only me, whole, free, and at peace. I thought of them then, scattered in their panic, stripped of their castles of glass. Perhaps they would recover someday, rebuild, or perhaps they would not. It no longer mattered. Their choices had led them there. My choice had led me here. The night deepened, and I poured one final cup of tea. Standing by the window, I watched the moon rise, silver and calm. A fitting mirror for the life I had reclaimed, not loud, not gilded, but steady, bright, and dignified. As I lifted the cup, I whispered the line that would close this chapter of my life forever. They lost everything that night. I gained myself. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where dignity defeats betrayal.